I'd like to introduce Paola Espitia, our guest for today, Water, Wonder, and Wellness, How Living by Water Makes Life Better. Paola is originally from Colombia. She is trained as a marine biologist with a master's degree in marine biology and coastal zone management from Southeastern University. She's currently teaching oceanography as an adjunct faculty at Florida Institute of Technology, but her world is quite a bit bigger than that, and her experiences have gone in many directions and are still evolving. She's a writer, photographer, very in-demand speaker. She, with her husband, is the founder of Olapai Creative, a media production company. They have worked all over the world, and certainly Paola's work has taken her in many directions. She is a professional naturalist for National Geographic Lindblad Expeditions. She'll be the naturalist this spring, for example, on the cruise through the Inside Passage, and that'll happen a couple of times this summer, along with a few other cruises for them. We know her because she's been the naturalist with the American Spirit cruises that stop in Port Townsend. Throughout the cruise season, one day of a 5-day trip is in Port Townsend. So she knows Port Townsend, she knows our area and our coastal environment very well. And those passengers then come to the Marine Science Center. And that is how we all met and started talking about topics in her wheelhouse that would be great for our series. And she certainly could have talked about coral reefs or marine ecology or local habitats or coastal resiliency, but we landed on water, wonder, and wellness, maybe because I was thinking ahead to February in the Northwest on a Sunday afternoon and thinking perhaps my brain could use a little watering by then as well. So this topic seemed particularly appropriate. I'd just like to thank Paola Espitia for being part of our series and being with us today from Florida. I will turn things over to you, and then I will see you on the other side for Q&A. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Diane. It is such a treat to be here. Hello, everyone. And I am just going to share my screen here. Yes. Does that look about right? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Hello, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here. We have a really interesting topic that is a little bit in a different avenue than maybe you are used to experiencing. So I'm really thrilled to be the one to maybe open your mindset on a new topic that I know will really resonate with you. But first, I wanted to bring you to my neck of the woods. This is Melbourne Beach, Florida. We are located on the Space Coast of Florida, which means I'm about an hour and a half south of Cape Canaveral. And so that also means that practically every week we get to see a rocket launch over the ocean. So it's a really exciting place to live. And this happened to be just the other morning. We have been having some west winds that really flatten out our oceans, especially in the morning time. And something that's really special that we have that you all miss out on is, of course, the sunrise over the ocean. So I just wanted to share this little moment that I captured the other morning from Melbourne Beach, Florida. And it's my home now, but like Diane said, I get to visit you all over the summertime, which is actually, I think, really clever because it gets really, really hot here in Florida in the summertime. And so what best time of year than to visit Port Townsend than June through August. So I cannot wait to be seeing you all again this summer. So stay tuned for when I'll get the chance to be out there. But just like Diane said, I have gotten a chance to come to Port Townsend visiting through the American Cruise Line cruises. And so I show up once a week on the American Spirit. And I remember the first time that I got off the ship, that was 5 years ago in Port Townsend, I was immediately charmed. Of course, we dock, we are right in front of all of these beautiful old Victorian homes, and the architecture is incredible. It's all waterfront. Of course, I love that. And it was right at sunset, so it was golden hour. And I remember looking out the window as we were docking, and I noticed that there was a pair in this dinghy making their way to the city dock, right where we were actually docked as well. And, I didn't think anything of it. Actually, I thought, oh, how nice. They're coming into town to go out for dinner or something. But then I noticed that they were struggling. In fact, they are taking on more water at this point that I'm not sure they're actually going to be able to keep up with. And so I end up watching this pair struggle to get the dinghy onto the, docked before they actually sunk, but they just hop right out as if nothing. And that's when I realized, there's something interesting about the people here. But how wonderful going out to dinner, even if it is a drowning dinghy. Then when I got off the ship, one of the first people that I came across, and maybe you all know him, maybe he's here, was this gentleman. And of course, what caught my eye was that gorgeous wood kayak on his roof rack. And I had never actually seen a wooden kayak like this before, but he goes on to tell me that he actually made this with his own two hands, and that I too could learn how to make a wooden kayaks just walking down the street and finding myself over to the woodworking place. So I very quickly found my way over to the Northwest Maritime Center and fell in love just watching through the window as people were there right before my eyes making these incredible vessels. And, it was really impressive. And I knew that there was something just very different about Port Townsend. I had never come to a town before where you could actually learn to make your own wooden boats and kayaks. And I knew that I was very soon going to be learning how to make my own kayak. Sometime soon, I was going to be learning how to make a wooden kayak. Well, I also ended up getting to know about the 70-48 race. And just so turns out, this last 70-48, a friend of mine who happens to practically be my neighbor, Seychelles, won on paddleboard. And so Floridians are starting to creep our way over into Port Townsend. Watch out. But we're charmed. We love all of these wonderful things that you have to offer. As I was coming back from the Northwest Maritime Center to head back to the ship, that's when I came across the conservatory. And I love this store, these coastal boutiques everywhere in Port Townsend. And so again, how can you not be charmed by all of this wonderful ode to the coastline? Then, as I was wandering around on another trip, I came across the water walk path. And I know there's even some local people who don't know about this path quite yet, but it is so spectacular. And it's very simple. It's just a wonderful little place to be able to create a path behind these hotels, behind some of these stores, and really get a chance to walk the coastline and be up near the shoreline. So making the coastline accessible is what that water path does. And it's so special. Every coastal town needs a water walk, is what I've decided. And then, of course, I've enjoyed all of the delicious local and even sustainably harvested eats. I find places that are offering help in different ways. They're offering sustainable seafood. And of course, you can eat these wonderful meals with a view, always with a view. I have even found myself in the middle of your quirky festivals, like the Roadie Fest. Hooray, Roadie Fest. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. I ended up meeting the most spectacular people. And, really, that's when I realized that I was amongst some really, really fabulous water people. But I would say actually the most memorable moment so far actually happens last summer when I had the opportunity to take this beauty out on the water. This is a handmade wooden kayak. Elizabeth there at the Port Townsend Marine Science Center built this herself. And when I asked her simply about where I could rent a kayak, this is what she showed up with. She actually brought me her own kayak to take out on the water, and wow, was she a beauty. And it was so incredible to actually finally be on the water, not only on the water in any old kayak, but this gorgeous handmade wooden kayak that a friend that I had recently gotten to know from the Marine Science Center ended up offering. And it really became a full circle moment for me. I felt like I had become adopted by your quirky coastal community. So today, getting the chance to meet you all in this way, thanks to Elizabeth, thanks to Diane, thank you to the Port Townsend Marine Science Center and all the sponsors of this lecture series. It's because of all of you it's such a treat to get to meet Port Townsend and your community in this way. So thank you so much. It's a real treat to be here. Well, I asked everybody, if anybody has actually been to space, if there's anybody who's been to space, I need to know this immediately. I always like to start in this way because actually now that I live on the space coast of Florida, I actually think that I'm getting closer and closer to meeting somebody who has been in space. But I bring this up because this image is, of course, what astronauts get to see when they launch out into the outer atmosphere. And they have such an incredible perspective. In fact, on Netflix, Will Smith hosts a show known as One Strange Rock. And it's such a neat program because it interviews astronauts. And whenever Will Smith interviews one of these astronauts, one of the biggest things that they say is that when they were in space, they understood what humanity was. There was no longer differences between language, between coastlines, between race, gender, religion, all of these things. From space, when you look back at Earth, this is what we look like. We look like a blue marble in the inky vastness of the universe. And this switch in perspective is something that is gifted to astronauts, but it's something that we don't get a chance to really understand or experience here on Earth. And you see, we should be better at understanding what this blue marble means to us, because it just so happens that, there's something about water that fascinates us and that draws us in. It's the most omnipresent substance on Earth. It's the primary ingredient for life as we know it. And of course, when NASA is looking for life out in the universe, they say, follow the water. And for good reason. Of course, life started because of water. Now, I invite you all to take a deep breath. Now take a second deep breath. Well, you can thank oceanic plankton for that second breath because, of course, the ocean provides us with 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. Even food, water provides us with food, with water-based protein. And actually, so much of us on this planet eat some kind of form of seafood that there's 1 billion people on the planet who need to require that food item. So they're looking to the sea, they're looking to rivers and lakes for food. The ocean and waterways, of course, support the livelihoods of over 500 million people on the planet. In fact, 2/3 of the global economy is derived from activities that involve water in some form. I mean, even my own career has been soaked in water as an aquarist, as a jellyfish breeder, as a coral scientist, a scientific diver, an underwater videographer, a wildlife guide, and an explorer. So my life has been soaked in water, and of course, that has been very intentional. Clean water is part of our everyday lives. In fact, in the United States alone, we use anywhere between 80 to 100 gallons of water simply for our basic needs. And because of our reliance on water, it is estimated that 80% of the world's population lives within 60 miles of the coastline of an ocean, a lake, a river, just like all of us. I also live right by water. What's most fascinating, though, is that Our bodies, our brain, our heart, our lungs are all about 70% water, just as our planet is 70% water. A science writer, Lauren Isley, once wrote, "Human beings are but a way that water has of going about beyond the reach of rivers." So our connection to water truly runs deep. But in recent times, we've drifted away from water. You know, we walk on sidewalks, on asphalt. We are always wearing shoes. We're not even grounding ourselves in grass that much. We drive on roads in human-built vehicles. We spend countless hours inside of built environments, breathing in artificial air-conditioned air. We eat processed food that tastes nothing like nature has intended it to. We use perfumes, soaps, household products that all mask the smells of nature, but yet have some kind of nature in the name. And even our sense of touch, you know, we're touching screens constantly. We're touching so many artificial surfaces that actually feel nothing like nature. So our modern lifestyle has separated us from the very stimuli that we have evolved to perceive. And that is the richness of nature, and the textures of nature, and the smells and the sights and the sounds found only in nature. It's become such a problem in younger generations that a new diagnosis has been identified: nature deficit disorder. This is a real thing. Our kids are not feeling the grass, climbing the trees, or catching the rain on their tongue anymore. And these times of disconnect we're actually seeing is having a real profound impact on our population. And it's especially happening because we have this always on culture. We are go, go, go. We are glued to our screens and we're no longer connecting. And then of course, COVID happened and that didn't help the issue. And so as a result, we have unknowingly developed a red mind of stress, and it's killing us. Our chronic stress and mental fatigue are resulting in memory problems, poor judgment, anxiety attacks, feeling drained, depressed, and even we're seeing an increase in autoimmune diseases. And as a result, we're turning more so towards pharmaceuticals to manage our pain and stress. But what if time spent in or around water was as effective and even more immediate than an antidepressant? What if we could treat stress, addiction, autism, PTSD, and other ills with fishing, with long walks on the beach, sailing? Well, of course, in this new field of science, that's exactly what we're finding. And what this is known as, it's a field of science that's actually combining neuroscience and conservation. We're looking at what happens when our most complex organ, the brain, comes in contact with the planet's largest feature, the ocean, water. And we are finding some really surprising benefits of what is known as a blue mind. What we're finding too is that water can help us transition from this red mind state of stress to, or even a gray mind state of numbed out depression, to a much healthier blue mind state of calm centeredness. And in our own lives, I know that there are times when you have experienced this. And oftentimes it happens when you're in the shower. Now, how many of you have ever come to realize that aha moment, right? It usually comes to you when you're in the shower. This is when your best ideas, your moments of genius happen, is when you're there lathering up the shampoo. Well, it turns out that this, of course, there's a lot of reasons why this happens. And one of the reasons is, of course, because in the shower, it's one of the few times in our day where we do not have a device in our hand or a screen in front of us. So that's one thing. But also what happens is that when you're in the shower, you're exposed to the sound of the water. The sound of water immediately puts us into a state of relaxation, and our breath rate slows down, which also causes our heart rate to slow. Then what happens is that the feeling of water even helps our brains to go into this drift mode, and it triggers this other way of thinking that uses a lot less energy, but is actually helping our brains to work smarter rather than harder. And so we slip into this different quality of thought that is much more introspective, it's much more present, And in this flow state is when we get that deep sense of connectedness that leads to the aha moment. So next time you're in the shower, try not to think about what you're going to be making for breakfast. Try not to think about who you need to call later in the day, but instead do yourself a favor. Focus on taking a shower, and maybe you too will evoke some more moments of genius. So what is it about water, about this shower example, that brings out the best in us? Well, of course, it comes down to our senses. When we're talking about water, one of the first things we think about is the color. The color of water is that beautiful color blue, right? I always like to wear blue when we're talking about water. And there's actually a lot to this. Studies show that, for example, colors can help us produce different emotions and put us into different states of mood. And the color blue always triggers this calming, euphoric, and energizing effect on us. So of course, we're going to be drawn to that color. And actually, people do say that the color blue is like their favorite color in the world. And in fact, Crayola Crayon every year comes up with a new name for a color. And just a few years ago, the color of the year was Bluetiful. So you can use that term from now on to describe the ocean. But the other thing that's interesting about the sight of water, and especially as we look at these, open expanses, is that it gives our brain an opportunity to actually literally take a break, to take a breath. Our brains are constantly needing to process the buildings and the billboards and the cars and the traffic and all of the activity. And especially now that our screens are involved, all of that motion that we're exposed to. But when we get a chance to look out on an open expanse, maybe even a very large lake, your brain literally gets to take that break. It takes that sigh. And instead of being overwhelmed by all of the stimuli, your brain is actually in this soft entrance while our minds still are remaining very actively engaged. You see, all of the movement of the waves just keeps us very excited, but yet we're still in this very calm, blue mind state of relaxation. Then there's the sound of water. Of course, that's literally the sound of relaxation, whether it's a waterfall, whether it's the sound of rain falling, or of course, the ocean waves crashing on the shoreline. But something that maybe you don't take into consideration is that rhythmic sound also helps to produce a lot of privacy and maybe even romance, you could say. If you think about it, when you're near a fountain or even walking down the beach with somebody, you can actually think that you're in this privacy bubble because the sound of the water running around you actually helps to block out your conversation. And so when you're in these moments, it's a really nice time to invite maybe a deeper conversation with the people that you're with, because you'll know that you are in this privacy bubble. And it's just a really beautiful moment to actually share more with one another. Then there is the smell. I call it the smell, but the smell of water. You see, turns out that fresh sea breeze has negative ions. And these negative ions, when we breathe it in, it actually helps our brains to produce that biochemical and helps to release serotonin. And so when we go for a walk on the beach and we breathe in the sea spray, we are actually helping our systems to boost our moods, alleviate depression, relieve stress, and even boost our daytime energy. And so rather than maybe going for more caffeine at 3 o'clock or just giving in, surrendering to a nap, a siesta, maybe instead you go for a walk along the beach and see how that doesn't energize you better. Then there's the touch of water. I think this may be my favorite piece. There's no other place on this planet where you can experience the weightlessness of those astronauts than in water. And growing up as a competitive swimmer, I loved how I felt in the water. For those of you who are scuba divers, I know you know this feeling very, very well, that although you're bogged down in all of this heavy gear, as soon as you get in the water, you have the relief of the weightlessness. And even when I'm diving, everything changes. Of course, you're underwater and you really need to focus on breathing, but my breath rate slows down. It becomes much more intentional, much deeper. I love all of these feelings. But there's even something that goes beyond, just the idea of scuba diving or swimming or surfing and having that sense of weightlessness in the water. But there's actually a lot of therapeutic benefits to floating. In fact, simply floating helps people with eating disorders to relieve their suffering, because when they're in their float tanks, they are in a scenario that allows them to lose sense of where their body line ends and the water begins. And so it helps to shift the way that their brains think about their size. So it's amazing that simply by floating, we can see that there's some real deep impacts for people who need it most. And then there's awe. Awe is so good. Awe is so good because it helps us feel small. And by being in water and in these places with wide open expanses, it really does help to trigger that feeling of awe and wonder. And that's something that we lose out on our everyday. And it's really important that we do find moments of awe in our everyday, because just so it turns out that people who experience awe tend to be kinder, more generous, more connected. And it's all because when you're in these environments, you really get the sense that you are in the grandeur of an immense planet, and that you drop the ego, you all realize that we're back into humanity. And that's why this effect is actually known as the overview effect that those astronauts experience from space. That's why it's so important for more of us to have that kind of experience, because, just imagine if more of us were in awe, it would give us a greater sense of purpose and meaning. And it just so turns out that those people who have purpose in their lives will live up to 7 years longer and more fulfilled. So whenever you are spending time near water and you allow yourself to experience these moments of awe that bring more meaning into your life, then you'll enjoy a longer, more fulfilling life. Now, I know you want to learn more about this science and dive deeper into this topic of blue mind. And lucky for us, there is a book all about it. It was written by a colleague of mine, Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, who's a sea turtle biologist and a surfer, who started wondering, how come the people around me are so joyous, so cheerful? And it's because he really innately understood that we had this draw to water, and it made us happy. So he teamed up with a bunch of neuroscientists and started conducting experiments and asking the right questions. And through these findings, they were able to actually put a name to that innate feeling and draw that we have to water. So the more that you spend time in, on, under, and near water, the more calm, focused, creative, connected, and happier you will become. And who doesn't want more happiness in their life, right? It turns out that when you are happy, your family members are happier, your community is happier, your colleagues become happier, and we really can spread this happiness quotient through entire communities and even impact wider cities. So these benefits truly run very deep, and we're finding that water actually has a very profound way of becoming a shortcut for less stress and more happiness. And what's really wonderful is that there are people out there who are actually harnessing this knowledge to practice it for good. So here's another colleague of mine. This is Dr. Scott Ramsey, and he is the director of the Alaska Outdoor Science School based up in Haines, Alaska. And he utilizes Blue Mind in all of his educational programs. In fact, his PhD dissertation was looking at something known as river time. What happens when people spend anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks on a river, which is what a lot of his programs do. And what he found is, of course, not only were people very much in their blue state of mind while they were in the experience on these rafting trips, but he also found that that feeling actually lasted upwards of 6 weeks later. And so it had a lasting impact, not just what happened in the moment. And so simply by rafting down the river, we can actually really start helping people carry the blue mind with them. There's another program based in Michigan known as the Northwest Passage, and they work with troubled youth to actually train them in mindfulness, but they also train them to be snorkel citizen scientists. So they teach them how to snorkel. They teach these kids how to use underwater cameras, and then they take them out to local lakes to actually capture some of the wildlife and the plants that they see in these lakes. Then they share these images with local conservation organizations. So now they have a better understanding of what the ecosystem looks like in all of these different spots that they haven't gotten a chance to go see for themselves. And so through this program, these youth are not only developing their own voice through the creative action of underwater photography, but they're also contributing to real science. And it's giving them a much greater purpose than what they had before they came to this outdoor therapy session. And then some of you may have heard of this group. They're known as Heroes on the Water, and they utilize kayak fishing to help wounded veterans overcome things such as PTSD. And what they do is through the physical therapy of learning to kayak, through the occupational therapy of learning a new skill like fishing, and through the mental therapy of evoking blue mind during these kayak fishing experiences, these folks who are in this program, these veterans, are really seeing vast improvements in their overall health and also in the struggles that they've had to face previous to these experiences. So even doing something as simple as kayak fishing can have really profound impacts on the people who need it most. Then there are the aquariums of the world. I have worked at several public aquariums. I love the Port Townsend Marine Science Center. They're doing such good work. And it just so turns out that they're doing work in the right avenue. There was a study that came out that looked at aquariums, and they would seat people in front of 3 different types of aquariums. The first aquarium simply had rocks. The second aquarium had some rocks and fish. And then the final aquarium was fully stocked with rocks and fish and plants and the whole shebang. It was a very beautiful, colorful tank. Well, as you can imagine, people, of course, sat longer in front of the tank that was fully stocked, that was most biodiverse, but they also actually ended up reporting lower anxiety. We saw lower cortisone levels, which are the stress hormones. We even saw that these people were actually reporting higher feelings of happiness and calm simply by sitting in front of an aquarium. Now, coming from a background in conservation, these findings are especially important for people like us because it really gives us a powerful talking points that goes beyond just simply acknowledging the ecological benefits of healthy waterways or the economic benefits of these healthy waterways, but it actually really shows us the emotional and the wellness, the well-being that happens and the benefits that we see, not just when we're around water, but when we're around healthy, wild, biodiverse waterways. Now, with this kind of knowledge and understanding of the profound benefits that water provides us, we can really work to be much more intentional about the way we live, we work, and we play. And we start, really thinking about how Blue Mind principles can be applied to greater communities. For instance, what if conservation organizations updated their messaging so that they were a bigger component in releasing the information about Blue Mind, making it something that's a much more wider and much more diverse Blue Mind movement. In fact, what if the aquarium started something like a Mindful Mondays, where people were invited to the Marine Science Center to pick an exhibit, to have a mindful moment. And then that would be the way that the community starts their week. What if real estate agents became spokespeople for healthy waterways because of Blue Mind? What if our health professionals even prescribed and facilitated Blue Mind therapy? And what if every child knew their own Blue Mind? Well, to make Blue Mind common knowledge and practice, we work with leaders across 10 different sectors that we call wet hearts sectors. These sectors include water and food infrastructure, environment and conservation, technology and innovation, that's the wet, and then in the hearts, health and wellness, education and parenting, arts, architecture and design, real estate and planning, travel, leisure, sports, recreation, spirituality, and mindfulness. And in this way, we aim to redefine the value of water and empower cities like Port Townsend to use this knowledge so they may build better, bluer cities and communities, and maybe even become a model for other coastal communities. So now that you all understand Blue Mind, it's time to practice Blue Mind. Just as Senegalese forester Baba Diom once said, in the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and understand only what we are taught. So I invite you to take this knowledge and understanding of Blue Mind. It's time to practice Blue Mind and protect the waters that you love so that collectively we may restore the relationship we need to live well on our blue marble. Now, if you are someone who works within or with one of the wet heart sectors, please reach out. Here's my contact information. I'd be happy to explore more ways that we can make Port Townsend an even better, bluer city. And with that, I thank you all, and I wish you water.